And good morning, everyone. And here we are back to the Balkans with Sal Depasquale. And I'm filling in for Dave Marcus this morning. And my name's Lauren Wood Muscurdy, and we won't even hold up another minute here. We'll hand it over to Sal and let him take it away.
Okay, Tito died in 1980, and it was just at the time that Yugoslavia was experiencing economic issues. Those issues had been brewing beneath the surface for a while, but they bubbled to the top after Tito's passing. Um, what you had is Tito wanted to alter the economy so that the wealth of Yugoslavia would become somewhat more evenly distributed amongst the population. Um, and so people were doing fairly well. Their incomes went up. Um, they had a freer style of living than they had before. We'll hear people talk about it and how they could decide, let's go for a ride for an afternoon and travel to some small town just to drink coffee. And they would have the ability to do that. What happened is when Tito altered the economic distribution, productivity didn't increase with it. Certainly, there were things that could have been done, but they weren't. And so, it's important to understand that you can have a strong leader and a very popular leader who wants to spread the wealth and wants to make a better life for the entire population. But that doesn't mean the person is competent in being able to pull it off. It's very difficult to do, and we can see many examples of leaders who come to power, who go, Chavez in Venezuela and others, and they fail. And they fail because they know what they want to see as the end, but they don't really have the ability to put together the plan and the strategy for accomplishing it. And so when the strong man then is out of the way, all kinds of resentments will bubble to the surface.
The economic crisis is becoming a threat to the state. Gasoline is scarce. Everyday goods are rationed. Many necessities are barely affordable for Yugoslavs.
Svaki dan je svaka cena drugčija, to je nemoguće stvarno. Čovjek se samo preslišava. Kad god ponesete, $1.000.000 nije vam dosta za jedan ručak za 4 člana porodice. To je strašno, zaista.
Tito's country had lived beyond their means for decades. Now, foreign lenders are calling in their debts.
When it came time to pay the bills in the 1980s, and that's what happened, that was when the decline happened. So coincidental with Tito's death, you had Yugoslavia's debt coming due.
Unemployment soars. Inflation rises dramatically. The crisis paralyzes the entire country, with one exception. The Yugoslav Secret Service is busier than ever.
So before his death, Tito managed to keep the lid on the diverse populations from coming into conflict with each other. Mind you, this is the population of many different nationalities, ethnicities, and religions.
10 years of war in Yugoslavia. 4 million people lose their homes. More than 100,000 lose their lives. The atrocities horrify the world.
We were very, very unprepared for the extent of the violence and the extent of the political chaos that was approaching very, very rapidly.
For 35 years, the dictator Tito appeared to hold different ethnic groups together. But just behind the facade, conflicts simmered.
So if you saw a flare-up of nationalism in Serbia, Tito would get rid of it. If you saw it in Croatia, brutally repress it. And this was how the balance was kept.
After Tito's death, old hatreds flare up, pitting neighbor against neighbor.
There was always an element of friction. The question is, when does that mixture of collective identity become antagonistic? When does it feel threatened? And historically, this has always been a pattern.
How did Yugoslavia become a powder keg? And who can guarantee that the Balkans don't explode again?
And so Tito's goals for improved economics for the working classes may have been attainable, but he did not have the skills or the strategy for accomplishment of that. And when countries hit economic distress, it produces demagogues who connect the distress with ethnic and religious hatreds. The reason that you are suffering economic distress is not because of the political decisions that were made in 2008. You're suffering this distress because of Black people, because of brown people, because of Jews, because of whatever that will cause fear and will incite the population.
Tito's country is a patchwork of peoples, with centuries of conflicts between them. Two great powers struggle across generations to keep the Balkans under control. The Ottomans conquer the southern territories. The House of Habsburg, later on Austria and Hungary, reach for the north. The eastern edge of the Balkans falls under the Russian Empire's field of dominance. Serbs, Croats, and Slovenians become pawns on a geopolitical chessboard. The result is a torn region, full of disputes and resentments between neighbors.
The topography of the territory and the history of the three great empires kind of overlap with each other, so that we have a ragged, ethnically and religiously divided map.
The largest ethnic group are the Serbs, but more than a third of them lives outside of Serbia. In Bosnia, for example, around 40% of the inhabitants are Serbs. They rebel against the reigning Danubian monarchy. In the capital, young nationalists kill the Austrian presumptive heir to the throne and his wife in the summer of 1914. The assassination becomes the trigger for the First World War.
It ended with Serbia victorious on the side of the Allies and the Croatian, Slovenian, Habsburg lands facing invasion from Italy, another ally, and so turning to Serbia for protection. So we got a marriage, not on ideal terms, not the Yugoslavia of the dream of the self-determination proponents, but a Yugoslavia dominated by the Serbian kingdom.
The Kingdom of Yugoslavia unites all southern Slavs in one country for the first time. Serbs, Croats, Slovenians, Bosnians, Montenegrins, and Macedonians.
And in this state, the Serbs had supremacy. They had the monarchy, the royal house. The Serbs were also overrepresented in the army and the administration, and that's why the non-Serbian nationalities have always complained about living under Serbian dominance.
The kingdom is from the very beginning seen as a Serbian project as opposed to a Yugoslav project.
In 1929, a far-right Croatian organization forms to oppose the Serbian monarchy. They call themselves the Uprising, Ustasha, and want Croatian independence. In 1934, the terror group gets its chance to strike. Serbian King Alexander I travels to Marseille in France for a state visit. Together, they discuss how to face the fascist alliance of Hitler and Mussolini together. 2,000 policemen protect the royal platoon during their trip through the city. And yet, a lone gunman slips through and shoots Alexander I down in front of running cameras.
The assassination was organized jointly by Croatian Ustasha nationalists and Macedonian revolutionary nationalists, and in a sense was a mark against this attempt to create a Yugoslavia.
Shortly before his death, the king says, "Protect Yugoslavia for me." But the assassination stokes hatred between the ethnic groups.
It was accompanied by the growth of radical nationalism, particularly amongst the Croats, also amongst the Macedonians. And this was going to pave the way for a really terrible, terrible train of events.
During the Second World War, the Ustasha are supported by Germany and Italy. The Axis powers conquer Yugoslavia and divide it amongst themselves. In Croatia, they install a fascist state, led by Ustasha founder Ante Pavelić. As a law student, Pavelić had been spokesman for a Croatian national movement. And in 1929, he founded the radical Ustasha in Italian exile. In 1941, he takes over government. Croatian independence by grace of Hitler.
Without military backup from the Italians, and especially from the Germans, that is, the Wehrmacht.
Okay, so we have the end of Tito's Yugoslavia begins with the Serbian Communist Party leader Milosevic, with a strategy for inflaming nationalism and anti-Muslim hatreds to oust Serbia's president at the time and to then elevate himself into the job. His plan starts in Kosovo, where nationalist Serbs falsely claim that Kosovo Muslims are suppressing them and they want the Muslims out. Now, mind you, we've talked about the different players. We have, it's all under one Yugoslavia. It then breaks up. The people who sided with Germany in World War I, they want independence, to separate themselves from Serbia. Also, to not be a part of Yugoslavia, because remember, Yugoslavia kind of turned away from Russia and was independent. They just wanted now to be independent. Serbia wanted to keep Yugoslavia together, but then when they realize it's not going to happen, then they fight for independence. But mind you, when they do, all of these countries, the people that want to be independent countries now, have populations in them that come from the other states. And so you've got the seeds of what will easily erupt into a horrible war.
The story began in Kosovo, Serbia's poorest province, bordering Albania.
Iako su oni tada tražili da opet ja idem na Kosovo i drugovi su predlagali, ja sam se založio da ide Milošević na taj miting.
The president sent his most trusted comrade to calm an ethnic conflict that was brewing up. The local communists, mainly ethnic Albanians, faced a challenge from a group of nationalist Serbs.
Milošević isključivo razgovore vodi sa visokim privrednim funkcionerima i sa komunističkim aktivima. Znači, on van komunističke maršrute ništa ne predviđa. Mi u Kosovu polju kao nacionalisti, oni ne sme da dođe.
Svaka druga osnova koja bi bila zasnovana na nacionalnoj netrpeljivosti, na širenju nacionalne mržnje, ne može biti progresivna osnova.
Druže predsjedniče, ja čekam 12 godine, poznaje me Azem Vlasi, poznaje me ovaj drugi i u CRK me poznaje. 12 godine čekam od suda.
Da je naša ocena u Centralnom komitetu Saveza komunista Srbije da mi nismo zadovoljni brzinom.
Milošević je održao jedan govor u svojstvu funkcije koju je tada obavljao. On je bio predsjednik Saveza komunista Srbije. Prišao sam do Bine i rekao sam mu, druže predsjedniče, jer ja sam tad bio komunista, član partije. Rekao sam mu, druže predsjedniče, vi ste ovdje imali monolog. Mi vas zato nismo zvali. Mi želimo s vama da imamo dijalog. I on je rekao, u redu je. Kaže, može li to da bude petak? I iz mase je jedan odgovor, može, u petak u 5 sati, može.
Živjelo bratstvo i jedinstvo naroda Jugoslavije!
By agreeing to meet the nationalists, Milosevic was violating the guiding principle of Tito's Yugoslavia and in Serbia's most sensitive area.
Kosovo nije jedan običan deo Srbije. Kosovo je samo srce Srbije. Čitava naša istorija je na Kosovu. Svi naši manastiri su na Kosovu.
In 1389, on the field of Blackbirds, King Lazar had led the Serb army into battle to try to halt the advance of Islam. Six centuries later, Serb television recreated their heroic defeat. By then, most Serbs had left this desolate province, but extras to play the invading infidel were plentiful. For the majority of Kosovans were Muslim Albanians. The few remaining Serbs claimed they were being driven from their ancient kingdom. Stories of Albanian atrocities, no matter how wild, were readily believed in Serbia.
U tim okolnostima je svaka pojava bilo koje srpske ličnosti koji bi otvoreno dao za pravo srpskom narodu na Kosovu da mora biti zaštićen, da mora biti ravnopravan, da ne mogu...
I just want to interrupt for a second. They are appealing to resentments that were rooted 600 years before. So, you know, when I talk about what's going on in the battlefield in the here and now, that it relates to things that can be hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, it's important because this event is not unique. And my argument is that we can identify the root of it, and it's not going to change until the root cause is addressed.
Da se siluju devojčice, da ne mogu da se pale kuće, da ne mogu da se ruše groblja. Morao je eksplozivno da dobije.
Milosevic now had the chance to exploit the Kosovo issue. He invited his most trusted advisors home.
Milošević više manje tu čuto, a mi smo svi galamili ostali. Jer on u stvari, koji ima najbolji pregled stvari i najveću odgovornost, on je bio, ne mogu da kažem vrlo zabrinut, ali je stvarno razmišljao o cijeloj situaciji.
Konsultovali smo se tako, da kažem, oko toga kako on treba da govori, da li treba da govori, kako treba da govori i tako dalje. Ja sam smatrala da treba da govori konstruktivno, da pruži podršku Srbima koja im i pripada.
Ta je situacija tamo bila neizdržljiva. Ljudi su bili potpuno obespravljeni. Mi nikad nismo imali u vidu da bilo ko u ovoj zemlji sme da bude diskriminisan.
Down in Kosovo, the local Communist Party boss soon heard Milosevic was up to something.
Milošević kishte pas dërguar një sekretar ekzekutiv, ai ka pas sekretarët ekzekutiv si njerëz për punë të dyta. Ai faktikisht disa serbëve kryesor ju ka spjegu shka duhet flasin.
Jer mi nemamo vremena. Petak, ponedjeljak večer, znači mi imamo utorak, sredu, četvrtak se spremimo, samo 3 dana. Mi idemo svak na svoju stranu, da se sretnemo s ljudima, da se vidimo, se organizujemo. Nego smo rekli svi ovi momci koji umeju dobro da se biju, da ponesu sve što treba. Mi smo za proširenje trotoara istovarili 2 prikolice traktorske ovakvih kamenova. To smo da se proširi trotoar, to nije bilo za policiju. I to je bilo tu, ako bi, ne daj Bože, zatrebalo.
Ani tha pra po shkojmë edhe po jetojmë qështu. E kemi shkuar pej Prishtinës, pej Zyres Neme, në fushë Kosovë, ishin mbledhur stadium, do kishin ardhur si zhurmagjia.
The Kosovo party boss trailed along beside Milosevic, uncertain of what he was walking into.
Da dođu ovde, drug predsjednik Milošević je dozvolio da uđu i oni.
When the meeting began, Serb after Serb claimed the Albanians in Kosovo were making life impossible for them.
Ja volim da živim ondje gdje me majka. Ja volim da mi djeca ostanu tu da žive, da mi posjete grob i da posjete djevinsko. Ja ne volim da idem u Srbiju. Ako moram da idem, ja ću da poginem, neću. Ovo je Srbija!
Ja sam tada prvi put čuo tu frazu etnički čisto. Tada je bilo Kosovo. Njihov je cilj bio etnički čisto Kosovo. Ljudi su ubijani, čak su i groblja raskopavana, paljeni manastiri, voćnjaci, polja. Počeo je egzodus Srba sa Kosova.
Ko Moskva për disa sene ndonë se e disha situatën, i thësha që po rrejnë. Atmosfera ishte tendosun, jo tolerante, kushdo që flitke që ishte sa ma ekstrem, ofendon të shqiptarët, fynë të shqiptarët, fiton të aplauz ma shumë.
Tu reken ćemo da zaustavimo. Ili će ta reka da krene nazad, da se ljudi vrate na svoja ognjišta, ili ćemo i mi kolektivno da idemo. Mi hoćemo da živimo ovde, to nam je osnovna želja, ali na ovakav način ne, ne i ne.
I sad, mi smo kobajagi počeli sastanak, ušli su ti, ali napolju se samo čuje nešto. Mi ne znamo šta se događa.
A scuffle had started outside between the Serbs and the Kosovan police. Everything was going according to plan.
Ovi su naši bežali, što je ohrabrilo policiju, pa je ona krenula u dobar juriš. Dok su je naše doterali do kamenja. Kad su ih doterali dotle, onda ovi naši okrenu tako da nijedan nije prošao bez poklona od narodne mase. Svi su dobili po 2, 3, po 5, po šlemu, po leđima, po glavi. I onda priđemo tamo opet do Miloševića i kažemo, napolje milicija tuče naš narod. I onda više nije mogo da prebaci loptu nikome. Ni da ide ovaj, ni da ide onaj. Onda on izlazi, verovatno je imao veliku tremu, uplašio se, preživljavao je strah, jer i on je isto, kao i mi, tako i on znao šta je sve u igri i šta je sve na kocki.
Shikoj pagës ashtu e koqiti ftyrën me shiqimin e vet karakteristik.
For Milosevic, this was the moment of decision.
Ti toga borca gurali, tukli, bili žene, decu. Ne piti sam ruka između nama baca kameniću, a mi tučeni bili. Druže predsjedniče. Molim vas, hvala. Hvala.
What Milosevic said next would change everything. That night, Serb television created the Milosevic legend. Serbia saw him embrace the cause of the Serbs in Kosovo.
Mi smo taj izveštaj pravili za svoje redovne emisije, mi imamo 3 kanala. I on je bio vrlo zadovoljan tim putem, zato što misli da je uradio ono što je trebao da uradi.
Vi kao predsjednik, kako možete da dozvolite da se diže palica na ovaj narod?
Drugarice i drugovi, mi moramo da radimo, da saslušamo sve vaše delegate.
Viewers in Serbia were not shown how the Serbs had provoked the police. The Milosevic myth was born with a lie at its core.
Well, let's see, does that sound like anything that we have going on today? This is the Milosevic, he comes to power in 1990 and he's provoking antagonisms against economic reforms that are aimed at stabilizing the economy. However, then he pushes for continuance of state-run business as opposed to a market-based economy. This opposition is mirrored in America's Tea Party movement. So what he does is he ignites a population very much like the Tea Party people got ignited to rally around his cause. And he'll change his cause along the way, but it doesn't matter. Once passions are unleashed, then it is simply a bloodthirst. Mind you, what they're saying is that the people in Kosovo, the Muslims in Kosovo, are attacking the Orthodox Christians from Serbia who are living in Kosovo. So the Serbians are saying, we have to protect our people. How many times have we heard of wars where we're invading to protect our people? Isn't that what Hitler did? I mean, what about Putin today? His argument, his initial argument to the Russian people is that there are Russians living in Ukraine, and we need to go and fight to free them and bring them back to the motherland. These are just techniques, and they work, unfortunately.
In 1986, a man emerges from obscurity onto the political stage in Belgrade, Slobodan Milosevic. His parents were Montenegrins. He self-identifies as a passionate Serb. The former industry boss and bank director becomes leader of the Communist Party of Serbia.
What Milosevic had was he was smart. He understood the way the world worked. And he, I think, very early on saw the power of nationalism.
During a visit to the Serbian minority in the province of Kosovo, a scene plays out that instantly makes him famous. When some Serbs in the crowd claimed that the local police, consisting mainly of Albanians, had beaten them. With some momentous comments, Milosevic pours oil on the fire.
From then on, everything that Milosevic does, you can see, is aimed at taking over power in Serbia and becoming the Serbian strongman.
Milosevic's message? The Serbs have to rise up. Otherwise, they face cultural suppression in Kosovo, and especially in Croatia. Serbian nationalism also flares up in other regions of Yugoslavia. Hundreds of thousands of supporters follow Milosevic's speech on the historic Kosovo field, a place almost sacred for the Serbs. In the summer of 1389, the Serbian Prince Lazar opposes the Ottomans, who conquer increasingly large parts of the Balkans. He dies in battle, and the invaders are unstoppable. But for the Serbs, the Kosovo field remains a symbol for their battle against suppression. To mark the 600-year anniversary of the battle, Milosevic calls for a revolt.
Danas, opet smo u bitkama I pred bitkama. One nisu oružane, mada I takve još nisu isključene.
From this moment on, it is only 2 years until the big bloodshed in Yugoslavia.
So as tensions intensify, Milosevic, but mind you, Yugoslavia is still in existence at this point in time. But so what he does is he takes what was the Yugoslavian army and he transforms it into Serbian forces fighting for independence while taking parts of Bosnia and Croatia. I mean, when the strong men, look, the strong men do the same stuff every time. And you know, if you're a minority anywhere where there's a strong man, you're in trouble, because that's what the autocrat, the dictator, is going to use to incite the population with fear of the minority, right? I mean, that they're a minority. Why are we afraid of them? Because the demagogue has managed to incite your passions and incite your fear, so that your fear then grows into hate. And then once you got hate, then you have the physical assaults, the rapes, the murders, the atrocities. So I know it's very complicated to keep up with all the players here as to what's going on. Serbia is considered the most powerful republic, and it is the seat of the Yugoslavian government in Belgrade. It is majority Eastern Orthodox Christian. It leads ethnic cleansing. Serbia leads the ethnic cleansing of Muslims in Bosnia, where Bosnian Serbs have a substantial presence. So what we're saying is that this, you know, we have this definition of a country of Serbia, but a large population of Serbs live in Bosnia. And so what they want to do is, when Serbia goes for independence, they want to take parts of Bosnia that will be reserved for the Serbians who are living there. They want to take parts of Croatia where there are Serbians living. And so they, at first, Serbia is opposed to sovereignty for any of the republics, but then it changes its mind along the way. And so it now wants independence, but as a part of the deal, Croatia and Bosnia have to give up land to Serbia, and the populations of Serbians living in Croatia and Bosnia now get to live on those lands. Croatia might, and remember, Serbia was on the side of, in World War I, of England, France, United States. Croatia and Slovenia, they supported Germany, right, in the fight. So again, you have these antagonisms are pretty deeply rooted. And Croatia praised Hitler. Why we got the Ustasha. They were basically the Croatian version of the Nazi police. Slovenia pushes for independence, and Serbia kind of first opposes it, but then it moderates and says, the hell with it, let them go. And they become an independent state. We have the religious faithful. So mind you, we talked about the ethnic people, I'm sorry, the Serbians living in Bosnia and Croatia. Now we also have religious differences. I know it's very hard to keep up with what are all the conflicts here, but you have to understand this eruption that took place is fueled by some of the most insidious motivations you can think of. And so you have, these guys are Orthodox Christians. The Croatians are Roman Catholics. In Bosnia you have, and Kosovo, you have a sizable Muslim population. So we not only have those nationalistic conflicts, we also have the religious antagonisms. What we have here is this bordering state on Serbia. It has a diverse population, a mix of religious affiliations. The Serbians want to have an ethnic cleansing, which results in an estimated 20,000 women in Bosnia being raped. Because mind you, when these people go to war, it is when you have that enormous power over people and you have developed such hatred for them, the defiling of women is part and parcel of the specification for what goes into that war. The Serbs in Bosnia lead the attack against the Bosnians. Then we will look in future classes. We'll see the massacres that take place in Sarajevo and Srebrenica. And so the tensions are leading to war, and it eventually, let me make sure I have the right one over here. Yeah, it eventually erupts. Believe it or not, it eventually erupts at a soccer game.
In Eastern Europe, the communist system breaks down in the fall of 1989. In November, the Berlin Wall falls. How long can the regime hold in Yugoslavia? Croatia is the first to demand sovereignty. During votes in May 1990, the National Conservative Party HDZ wins and brings their founder, Franjo Tudjman, to power. The former partisan fighter was a member of the national movement during his school years. Now, he becomes strongman of the republic, with a mandate to detach from Yugoslavia, and he's willing to go to war for it.
Franjo Tudjman had a combination of the military and the mythological, the Croatian greatness, the restoration of what he saw of the dream of a Croatian state.
Bosnia-Herzegovina and Slovenia also demand their independence. Yugoslavia is on the verge of falling apart. Tito's vision of a southern Slavic multi-ethnic state has failed.
The Yugoslav identity didn't work to dissolve those identities, and in many respects didn't even work to keep them all balanced and in harmony all the time.
In May 1990, host team Dinamo faces Red Star Belgrade in Maksimir football stadium in Zagreb. When Vyacheslav Skriniar and his team come onto the field, Croatian and Serbian fans start fighting.
A rumble began on the north side. Dinamo supporters broke through the rails of the barriers. The chaos became worse and worse. Our fans ran out onto the grass.
The situation goes out of control. The Yugoslav police tries to push the Croatian fans off the field. Zagreb's team captain, Zvonimir Boban, storms a policeman and attacks him with a targeted kick. The midfield star becomes a hero of the Croatian resistance against the Belgrade-based federation. After that, nothing is the same.
In that moment, the separation between Croatia and Yugoslavia began. We then played one last season in the Yugoslav League, even though the situation became more and more crazy. Yugoslavia kept existing for another year, then it fell apart.
An angry crowd revolts against the Serbian dominant state power. The Yugoslav tragedy runs its course. The game never starts. And to this day, the 13th of May, 1990, is considered a fateful day for many people. A year later, Yugoslavia is in flames.
Okay. I think it is important to really take a good look at ourselves. Red states, blue states, how quickly can passions be inflamed? Doesn't have to be based on truth. The whole thing with Serbia and the Kosovo police was a lie, and they knew it was a lie, but it worked. Still works, seems to be working in America today. How vulnerable are we? And you can say, you know, do we have the economic distress that came upon Yugoslavia? Well, the crash of 2008 still looms large in the lives of many people in America, and we need to be cognizant of that. Okay, we can open up for discussion.
Of course, everyone can use the raise the hand function or put your comments or questions into chat. As people are thinking through all of this, because my gosh, there is a lot to digest here. I noticed that you have indicated that you know, a lot of this had to do, of course, with religion. Well, so what I'm going to say, the reasons that were given for the divisions were the ethnic differentials and the religious differences. Oftentimes in wars, it is because people are going after resources that other people have. Was there any aspect of that in this area of the world, or was it completely all created or ginned up, if you will, over just ethnic and religious differences?
Well, as I tried to highlight in the beginning of the class, if we go back 4,000 years, the phenomenon of agriculture had begun in the cradle of civilization. but those soils were depleted. People from that area moved on to other areas. What was the next area? It's the area what we call the Balkans. and so they recreated that. And they were fighting amongst each other for what were the resources that were there. So these antagonisms, once they get started, it's initiated over issues of greed and power, but over time they morph into they can even forget, and they may be fighting not about some specific resource like oil or sugar or cotton, but what's happening is that those underlying resentments become a fuel, and it gets disguised behind religion, behind nationality, behind skin color. And the point I wanted to make at the beginning was that, mind you, they were killing each other before we had those tools, before we had religions, before we had nationalities, before there was distinctions made based on skin color. So you can kind of look at a before and after, and then what I come to see is that those things are merely tools to inflame.
To create
Milosevic found that he had a huge crowd out there, and they were talking about how the Kosovo police were attacking them, and Kosovo was related to Islam. He could, at 600 years ago, they had fought the battles against Islam. So he knew he could strike that button and get support. So we got to be careful about what are those things, when you think about America, what are those buttons that can get pushed in Americans to get us to get out there and kill each other?
So creating dog whistles that were appropriate for that area or would elicit that response in that area. Interesting. Okay. Well,
but it's not a dog whistle. It's a foghorn. This is, we're not disguising it. It's right out there.
Yeah. Eileen, what do you have? Whoops. Uh-oh. Eileen, we keep missing you.
You're unmuted, but your microphone isn't working.
Eileen, we can't hear you. You know what? Say something now. No. Okay. We're going to come back to you in 1 second, and we'll take Gisela, and then we'll come back to Eileen.
I'm just curious how Slovakia and Hungary did not get involved in all of this conflict, because there are many Croatians who live in those countries.
Remember, this is the Berlin Wall has come down. All the structures around the Soviet hegemony over Eastern Europe is in flux. So many of them are really looking at their own vulnerability at the moment and how they're going to deal with it. And mind you, what eventually happens with Hungary? You get, another strongman comes and takes over power. And so I think that the fight in the Balkans was, we don't need to get involved in this because we know that's going to be one big bloodbath, and we need to stay out of it because we got our own problems. That's my guess.
Fodder for another class, huh? Eileen, were you able to get your mic working? No, doesn't seem like it. Dang. Well, if you can put something in the chat, that'd be okay. So again, I think this is such a huge topic that people don't even know where to start with it. Anyways, well,
Susan, you must have something to add to this.
I would think.
She may have walked away for a minute.
No.
Okay.
Wait. No, I'm still here and I'm listening. And the stories that I heard, even 3 years after the Dayton Accord, which is when Bosnia-Herzegovina was divided then to give and build the Republic of Srpska. Hold on one second. So I'm getting a message. Oh, okay. So when the Republic of Srpska, and we were invited, almost like from the minister of the schools there, when we were working in a former safe zone called Gorazda, which wasn't very safe at all. It was cleansed. The people across the road into the Republic of Srpska were saying, how come we don't have that kind of what these Americans are offering in training on how to deal with our poor children who are suffering? We went over to meet with them, and you could feel in the room of people who want us, but the conflict around the tension of resentment and sense of isolation. What I tried to do, and it was like learning diplomacy by the seat of my pants, because I had to hold on to my own emotion around this, or defensiveness, and make an appeal to an understanding that we are for all people who have suffered as a result of this, and get a buy-in. And so we could do that into the other cities that still had predominantly a Muslim population, but we could get Bosnian Serbs to start coming to our program. Going into the Republic of Srpska, I was warned by our ambassador at that time of it's still a little soon. So invite them to come in, and they need to come across the road, essentially, to come to the programs in Gorazda, and they never did. But we could reach the cross-cultural population going to the bigger locations. But the stories that I heard, and as an American, I maybe had heard about rape as warfare. But when I really got on the ground and I started realizing what had happened vis-a-vis that tool of war, I was shocked. I also heard from the Bosnian Serbs, the worship, and the Bosnian Muslims, the Bosniaks, they call themselves. They were worshipful and nostalgic about the days under Tito, because to them, life was perfect. And they wanted to go back to that. Just like I hear people in our own population, my generation, saying, oh boy, I really long for those days of the 50s and the 60s, even the 60s with the Vietnam protests. And I say, careful. So you forget history, or you never know history, you will repeat it again.
Yeah, we're gonna look at the Civil War next week, the start of the Civil War. And the UN sends in troops to create a safe zone, but they quickly become overwhelmed, and they just basically step aside.
Yes, as we saw in the biggest genocide since World War II in the town of Srebrenica, where I, in fact, have ended up with a daughter.
Yeah.
She lost her father and 5 uncles. And the family had, for hundreds of years, owned the land in the mountains there. So I got a taste of what genocide's all about, up close and personal.
And that's stuff you can't forget. And that gets passed on to future generations. These are so horrific. I mean, these experience, it's hard, you know, when you talk, if you have not been around any of that, it's abstract to think about what's it like when 20,000 women have been raped. What does the society deal with? It's too far away. But when you're been up, their lives will never be the same again. No matter how much help they get, no matter how much healing they go through, you'll never heal all of that wound. It's a horrible experience. And not just the rape, but you're losing members of your family. You know, I don't think Americans have yet to understand what we did in Iraq and what we did in Afghanistan. We think we have felt the retaliation from that, the revenge that it hasn't happened yet, but it's gonna. As sure as anything, it's gonna happen. Look at the ISIS people in Russia who are venting their anger about what happened in Chechnya. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's not just the horror of the moment, it is planting the seeds for what will be tomorrow's horror.
Well, and we have well-sprouted seeds from the Civil War in our own country.
Absolutely.
And generations of hatred who have given voice now to come out from under the rocks, if you ask me, and spew poison.
When you listen to Milosevic or Tudjman, right? It's like going to a Trump rally. There's no difference other than the change of language. Yeah.
Bob, what do you have?
Susan, I'd like to hear, if you feel comfortable talking about it, a little bit more about that genocide that you have some experience with.
Well, one of the places that in our program was a training program for teachers and social workers. And actually, we even had physicians and psychologists who were not necessarily doing a lot of practice, but came into our training program just to learn something that was considered new there. And it's the use of the arts therapy. And I'm not just visual art, I'm talking dance, movement, storytelling. So one of the first times I went to Sarajevo, I was given a full tour of all the destruction. And I met with also people from a church. It was a Orthodox church where one of the priests had gotten together all members of the different ethnicities to come sing their songs together. And from their songs, they then were tugging on me. Let me tell you my story. Because I was introduced as someone who was coming in to create dialogue and use of arts for the children. And pretty soon the adults were going, this is in our programs after about a week, this is helping me. And I really came here just to learn something new for my students. But my sense was one of the places that I was taken to, and I had heard about rape warfare, and I read every book I can get my hands on before going to Bosnia in 1998. I was taken to one of the huge orphanages. And the orphanage was filled with children, because they were elementary at that age, that had been from rape of women who had been captured and kept until they were pregnant and then turned loose if they weren't assassinated. So they tried to go back to their villages, and the shame and the betrayal was so great. The families did not want their daughters back pregnant with a Serb baby. This is really hard. And yet the women then had to make decisions about being able to come visit the children, those that would sneak away from their families, come to see the child that they gave birth to. And they would bring them little gifts and then have to scramble to get back to their villages and maybe ride a bus that they'd have to find some small amount of money to get on a bus and get away. The conflict within the women who survived rape warfare. And also we did a whole program with many of them. So we heard their stories and how they were, you know, in their front yards and grabbed and taken to deserted hotels and locked up. And families. We had stories from children who witnessed their mothers and grandmothers and sisters being raped in front of their eyes. And these children, a couple of them were brought to us. They were making an effort to try to educate them because there had been a mandate from the UN to please deal with this educational crisis. So some of these children were just plain mute.
Oh.
And we did see, we had a couple of kids that were like poster children who actually started taking up crayons and making marks on paper. And then the drama therapists were able to get them to create a sound. So powerful, powerful years of, we were there for 5 years. We did a train the trainer program after 3 years, so that people could begin to send out others to do a very simple program. I mean, I went to the Georgia Art Therapy Association and recruited people that I had come to know and people that I didn't even know to help me put together a curriculum. And so the genocide, though, and the young woman that I refer to as our Bosnian daughter is Sejdića Dozić. And I went to the cemetery that President Clinton had opened to see, this is years after we had started, to see rows and rows of the male family members. She has had the International Commission of Missing Persons did a good job getting a lot of DNA samples from relatives so that they can try to match up the remains that are still in storage there. I got to know a lot of the people there at ICMP and have that tour. But Sejdića took us to her home in Srebrenica a few years ago when we went over. She, by the way, came and lived with us. We call her our daughter, though she's not adopted. She is a victim of having lost her father. Her mother's still alive, and thank goodness her mother gave us permission to bring her over and educate her. She went to Georgia Tech, graduated at the top of her class. No, her story is like a Cinderella story. So she took us to the cemetery. She took us to the building in Potocari, where they did round up all these men and incarcerated, you know, put them in there, tortured them, killed them, which was across the road from the cemetery. So you can see, like visiting, I have also visited Dachau. I've gone, you know, so just like a concentration camp anywhere, these exist there in Bosnia. And in Srebrenica, they made, you know, a memorial associated with the cemetery. But the other thing I want to say is what amazed me is the mixed marriages in these cities between Bosnians and Serbs and Croats too. But it was basically the tension, and the stories that I heard came from the siblings of who had married different ethnicities and said, I was the best man in my brother's funeral, in wedding, when he married so-and-so who was a Serb family that we knew really well, Bosnian Serb family. And if I had seen him, we had nothing to do with him. We both lost many, many friends. But if I had seen my brother on the street walking, even after the war, and I had a gun, I was to kill him. And I'm still dealing with that. This man is telling this story in our group dynamic process of the Art Reach Foundation, and tears are running out of his eyes. And we're all just wanting to embrace him. And he said, you have no idea the power of politics to, and one person, he said, we didn't even take Hitler serious. One Bosnian said to me, Susan, if Hitler had sent us the guns, you think we would have turned them down? No, we would have taken them and pledged to him.
I have a hard time comprehending or even imagining the shame that those young women experienced when they went back home to their families and they were rejected by their families because of something that happened to them that they had no control over.
There's probably a million stories that sit with children who were the product of the rape of the mothers who would come to the orphanages to see them occasionally, because these children could not be adopted.
Oh.
The country wouldn't allow it. You know, the government would not allow it because people tried to come there to adopt children.
Yes.
Wow.
Mind you, it's the same phenomenon is there in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Women who were raped or were prostitutes during the war are shunned. Or children who were born are shunned. It's pretty outrageous. It's very sad. But
you know, Cal, I bet a lot of those young women who became prostitutes in Vietnam became prostitutes because they wanted to feed the family, lived 50 miles away.
There's no doubt. I mean, it was, you know, they were put into a corner that they had no way out of, and you would have their father would negotiate with the Americans so that he could bring his daughter through the barbed wire into the camp.
Yeah.
And you know, it's horrible. It's just horrible, horrible, horrible. And I mean, and overall, when I get into keep digging deep to find where were the roots of all of this, it comes back to, you know, the agriculturalists that emerged and all the things that flowed from that. The crime begins there, but the dominoes keep falling.
Yes.
And it's not to make any kind of excuse. It is to say, if we cannot, as a species, somehow find a way to live with each other, I mean, you know, it's not to mean that people can't be successful and they can't have luxuries or whatever, but shouldn't be the first thing on the agenda. The first thing on the agenda ought to be people living a sustainable life. I'm not talking about, you know, sustainable. I have food, I have shelter, I have, you know, I can get educated, a sustainable life. And if we can't get to that, we will destroy the whole planet. Those nuclear bombs that we learned about from Oppenheimer, they are much bigger today than they were yesterday.
Yeah, they sure are.
And when you start thinking about a guy like Putin, if he gets put into a corner, do you think he'll use them? Do you think Netanyahu will use them? I mean, you can talk about mutual assured destruction. You have to be rational to understand that. What happens when you get someone, you know, a demagogue who gets into power? There's no reasoning with them. You know, it's so my hope, you know, we did the class on the brain and how we got these neurons that came about only about 25,000 years ago, that somehow they may make all the connections where the mass population will say, we got to stop living like this. Because there's going to be more Bosnians. There's, you know, we keep getting into our head, if we can just get rid of Saddam Hussein, everything will be fine. If we just get rid of Hitler, it's over. We're okay. If we can just vote this moron out of office, we're saved. That ain't going to do it. And that's my theory, that we have to deal with the root. And that's maybe grandiose, but I don't know of another answer that's gonna that is satisfactory to me for what will be the long-term existence of our species.
It may be equally as grandiose for me to mention Muzaffar Sharif's book, In Common Predicament, but that everybody heard about in psychology class in college, where in the summer camp, where he first divided the boys into teams and everything, and they became very competitive with each other and angry and hostile towards each other. And then he turned off the water supply, and the only way to get the water back on in the camp was for everybody to get together, all three groups of boys, and to find out how to where the water supply was broken and how to fix it. And that was what he called a superordinate goal. And it worked in the campsite. And I don't know what our superordinate goal will be here. You know, we see all these forest fires, and and these storms that and these water rushing up in Miami and places like that is highly unusual and is getting worse. Mm-hmm. Maybe something about global warming will be a superordinate goal, but I think that might be more optimistic than overly optimistic.
No, look, I think there are good examples of it. When you consider where we as a where we were, Homo sapiens, 40,000 years ago. The Neanderthal was much bigger and badder than us. The animal, the wildlife could trample over us. We learned, and part of, we separated from the chimpanzees, our closest relative, because they were uncooperative, that they couldn't work together. So we said, no, we want to work together. And we did, and we survived. Something happened to change that. And I think that it's a disease, and it's a disease that can be cured, because inevitably, if we don't work together for survival, we either all survive or none of us do.
Did you notice in those films that you just showed that all of the people either in the streets rioting or at the soccer games fighting, how many of them were female?
Mm.
So if we could get some injections for males, and that somehow did something with, I don't know what it is, testosterone, too much testosterone or something else, maybe we could put it in the water, maybe.
No doubt the most dangerous chemical on the planet is testosterone.
Mm.
It just is. We're going to, as we go, as we look at the Civil War breaking out, and again, how passions become inflamed, and how people can rationalize and justify the extermination of people. That's what we're looking at. And that, one of the most hateful people that we'll see will be Ratko, what's his last name? I forget. Lucy Ratko. Susan? Right. And what's going to and what you come to hear is that during World War I, he saw people killing his family not from the Germans, but from within what became Yugoslavia. And so they're venting frustrations that are way before the time that it's taking place. So I think it's what I like so much. The reason that I find the Balkans so significant is that this is a place that has played out the themes that I've pontificated on ad nauseum, and it highlights it in a very, I feel, clear way, even though it's confusing to keep up with who the players are. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank Susan for her personal testimony today.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. That was very good.
Outstanding, you know, thing to hear firsthand from these areas and how impactful it was. And we've kind of run over, but so I'm going to just say a quick thank you. And we don't have class next week. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Right.
And just amazing information again. Thank you so much, Sal.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.